Okay, we're live. Welcome to Dive into World Building. I'm Juliette Wade, and I'm really excited about this week's hangout. This is an experiment, and this is going to be a super fun experiment because what we're doing is we're talking about point of view in world building. It is a continuation of our discussion of 2 weeks ago, and effectively what we're talking about with point of view in world building is that the point of view of your main character will actually help you significantly and reduce the load of description and what we often commonly think of as world building, because the characteristics of the point of view can actually inform readers about the world. So there are quite a number of people here who have given me examples from their work, and we're going to take a look at those. But I guess I wanted to talk briefly first about what it is about point of view that helps so much with world building. And in my mind, it's the idea of judgment. That whenever you have a character and you're in their head, they are judging things. They're reacting to things. They have their own individual way of responding to the things that happen in the world. And what that means is they become a really good gauge of what's normal, what's not normal, what's taboo, what's good manners, what's bad manners, all these different kinds of things that they might encounter and that they might run into. The way that they respond to events is going to tell you a ton of stuff about the features of the world. So does that make sense to everybody?
Absolutely.
I think in a way it's like where we got to at the end of our last hour of discussion. But I wanted to, because I have some examples, I thought examples would be a really great way of going about this. So I'm going to start with some examples from things that people here have not written. And so I'm going to tax your listening skills a little bit. Let me see though, because I might be able to actually help you.
I'm reminded also of something Mary Robinette Colal said on the Writing Excuses podcast, which was that the writer can only have their attention on one thing at once through the text, and how you direct that seems also to be a tool you could use to make.
Okay, so here's what I'm doing. I'm putting a quote in the chat bar so that you guys can actually look at it. And I'm going to read it aloud so that people on the video can actually hear it. This is from Jacqueline Carey. Okay? Lest anyone should suppose that I am a cuckoo's child, got on the wrong side of a blanket by lusty peasant stock, and sold into indenture in a short fallen season, I may say that I am houseborn and reared in the night court proper for all the good it did me. That's the first sentence of Kushiel's Daughter.
Yeah,
okay?
It does tell you about what they think about class systems.
Well, so this is a treasure trove sentence. Okay. You've got evidence of the world all over it, starting with the word lest. Mm-hmm. Lest places you chronologically in a time period where people are going to say something like lest. Right? So we know immediately with the first word that we're not in modern time. Anyone should suppose that I'm a cuckoo's child. The idea of a cuckoo's child is a very specific idea that comes from our world, right? Because cuckoos are real things that we know about. Mm-hmm. Got on the wrong side of a blanket by lusty peasant stock. So we know that being considered a peasant is an option in this world, right? So because we have less, we're probably likely to think at this point that peasants actually exist in this world, right?
Right.
Sold into an indenture in a short fallen season is extremely specific about what can happen to peasants, right?
And
A
what
short
they
fallen
told you.
season meaning we didn't have a big enough harvest, right? We don't have enough money to live on, so we're going to sell our child into indenture. We're going to sell our child off as a servant because this will help us to stay alive. This is clearly a doable thing in the world where this person is from, right?
It's doable to peasants, not just by their rulers. They have that agency.
Right. So I may say that I am houseborn. We have to use capital letters sparingly because if they're all over the place, they get to be overwhelming. But it's a way of marking something as this is a thing, right? So then we have to figure out, and reared in the Night Court proper. Night Court is really interesting because in our world we don't have anything called the Night Court, right? So this is the first real piece of evidence besides the title of the book that we're not in Kansas anymore, right? Because we could be in ancient Kansas. Just kidding. But if you see my point, Night Court is a thing that she's putting out there, and she's saying, look, this is a thing that you don't know that you're going to have to explain. And if you want to know about it, you're going to have to stick with me, right? This person is also full of attitude, right? The fact that she should say, lest anyone should suppose, suggests that it's quite possible for someone to suppose that about her. And she's going to try to cut that off at the front, right? Which means she's a person of considerable pride, right? For all the good it did me, tells you that she's probably in trouble. It makes you want to figure out what the heck's going on. But do you see, this is a very opinionated person, very aware of social class levels. Breeding is really important in this world. Peasants exist. I mean, you could make a list of all the cool things that you learn about the world in this one sentence. Make sense?
Mm-hmm.
It is a list. I just put the list down.
So exactly. So that's part of the point here, is that you can do a ton in a single sentence if that's how you're going to approach it. Now, just to sort of throw a wrench into things, I also have this other thing. Okay, I'm just going to read you this little paragraph, and it's in a book, so I'm not going to be able to copy it in, but here we go. I'm not going to analyze it in quite as much depth as I did that one, because that's one I actually did a blog post on. If you want to find it, you can find it on my blog. It's called A Ridiculously Close Look. Pedro No Delone, the name of the character, A Ridiculously Close Look, if you want to go look for the blog post. Anyway, here's this paragraph, and I'll try to read it slowly. One writes a letter, taking particular trouble to get it up as prettily as possible, then waits for the answer, making sure every moment that it cannot be much longer before something comes. At last, frightfully late, it is brought in, one's own note, still folded or tied exactly as one sent it, but so finger-marked and smudged that even the address is barely legible. The family is not in residence, the messenger says, giving one back the note. Or, it is his day of observance, and they said they could not take any letters in. Such experiences are dismally depressing. This is a quote from The Pillow Book by Sei Shonagon. And it was written in about the year 1000, and it is literally this woman's diary. Okay? She is writing about her actual life. But if you listen to it and you understand how judgmental she is, because let me tell you, this lady is super judgmental and it's awesome. Okay? You not only know what's happening in her life, but how she feels about it, and all of a sudden you feel like you're there in the year 1000 in Japan. Right? And there are all kinds of little tells in here. Like, for example, the fact that it's important to take trouble to make your letters look really pretty when you send them to somebody, right?
Yeah, in Japan was great.
Right? And that one should expect to have a reply within a certain amount of time because that's good manners, right? And when one gets a reply, one should not get one's own note, and it shouldn't have been treated roughly, right? The family's not in residence, or it is his day of observance. And that is so interesting because that talks about days of observance that happen in the society at that time. And you can actually keep reading and you can look at the kinds of things that people observe that would forbid them from having social contact on a particular day, right? And then, of course, such experiences are dismally depressing. One of the other flavorful things in there is that she refers to herself a lot as one. It's interesting, and it could be a quirk of Japanese grammar, because to be honest, in Japanese, a lot of times they don't use subjects of sentences. But at the same time, when you translate it as one, it's almost like she's sort of putting herself as an every woman kind of character.
Tells us a lot about how close her world is, considering her social position.
Yeah, and it really helps you to kind of understand. It helps you to kind of align yourself with her, right? So that's not even fiction, which is one of the reasons why I say that world building is not just a fiction thing, right? It's an everything thing. So those are two. They're pretty contrasting, but both of them are very judgmental. So both of them are first person, sort of. I mean, I guess one is a little bit different, but they're both very first person kinds of things. But I do want to make a note for whoever's watching this and for you guys as well. This stuff does not depend on being in first person. You do not have to be in a first person point of view to do this stuff. So, thoughts before I go on?
Just that, you know, as writers, we also have to be aware that, you know, it is a little harder to, for me at least, to tease things out of the Seishonagon gun. I don't know how to pronounce it. I've forgotten all my.
Yeah, no, you did fine.
Passage, and we have to be careful about trying to convey the right amount. We don't want to info dump, but at the same time, when I was younger at least and tried to read the Pillow Book of Seishonagon, I had trouble because I just didn't have the context. Yep. And I didn't know how to tease it out of a first-person historical primary source.
Well, so one of the things that we're dealing with here is that neither one of these two excerpts actually does any explaining whatsoever. You're just dumped right in, right? And that's one technique, right?
Yeah.
There are other approaches.
But you can still see the difference, because the first one is so packed with info about the world, where the other one, it's a little more dispersed. And I think it's, I don't know how to explain it. It's like it's more about her. Like it's not trying to introduce you the same way.
Yes, because this is actually somebody's diary.
Yeah, exactly.
There is no authorial intent to introduce you to a world.
Yeah, and you can see that, and I think, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so so if you'll humor me, I'm gonna introduce you to people from my book, so I can show you how this works when you're working in when you're working in third person. So this one I can put it in the chat bar. Okay. Taggart believed in music the same way he believed in the sky. It was unreachable, invisible, transcendent, and somehow promised that there had to be more to life than this. Mother had always assured him, when they'd fallen back into that vague, wistful state after the grand concerts were over, that they must be grateful to have been born into the nobility and have their health too, that no better life could be had in all Varin. With her beside him, he could believe that it was true. But then Father's official appointment as Elixir of Selimna had stolen her away across the surface wilderness, leaving him and his brother behind. Okay. Now, again, this is one of these things, it's an internalization introduction, right? There's not a lot of external stuff going on. But there are elements of the world that I wanted to make sure I got in as soon as possible. For example, they do not on the surface of their planet. Okay? And I tried to get that in sentence 1 with believed in the sky, because there really shouldn't have to be any reason why you would have to believe in the sky if it's just there, right? There are ways that you could believe in the sky if it's right there, but that's why I back it up with unreachable, invisible.
Yeah, I wasn't quite sure what that did first, but it made me think and it drew me in. So.
Yeah, and I put it out there as a sort of a little crumb, and then later I talk about surface wilderness.
Which brings us.
Which is another little crumb to tell you, oh, by the way, this connects back with that concept, right? I can have him refer to the surface wilderness. That is sort of an explicit indication of the world, whereas believing in the sky and talking about it as unreachable and invisible is an indirect judgment-based way of trying to convey the same thing. So so when you're working with text like this, you have a million different opportunities to judge your world, to indicate things about it, like the fact that he goes to concerts and something that makes him happy, right? It tells you a lot about his personal background, right?
Yeah.
They must be grateful to have been born into the nobility and have their health too.
That's another crumb, at least for me. I'm like, why is health specifically mentioned in the context of concert?
Right. Well,
because you're going to find out.
Because you're going to find out. Like, a lot of the stuff that you build into people's judgment and the things that they talk about, people do talk about the way that they're supposed to behave and the things that they're supposed to believe about themselves, about their world, right? And things you are supposed to believe tell you a lot because people can struggle with that, right? And have their health too is a breadcrumb that's going to lead to a major event at the concert. Because not everybody has their health too. Yeah. Anyway, right, and then you have things like, let's see. I think the first hint that we're not on Earth is Taggart's name, which is not an earthly name. The second piece is that he believes in the sky. Concerts, Varin.
Elixir isn't a real title.
Elixir of Selimna is not a, there are a bunch of different types of evidence.
Yeah.
It's not just that we have unfamiliar names. It's that we have unfamiliar names and unfamiliar beliefs and unfamiliar statements about what people should expect. Expectations are a really important thing.
I'm observing something about the first sentence, believed in the sky, and then the last one about surface wilderness. And I think that the bit about the sky is important because if all you have is the surface, it's not quite as, doesn't have the same suggestion that, I mean, the surface is above and not, the surface of the world that you're orbiting, or having a cloud city. But
yeah,
since
that's true.
You don't have to believe in a sky if you're in orbit or a cloud city.
Yeah.
So
I mean, part of what you do introducing a world is you give people things that they need to have. You give people information. Part of what you do is you exclude things that you don't want people to consider, right? It's almost like guiding water. You're guiding a person's expectations. And if, for example, you're going to end up making people think that this is somehow a medieval scenario, there's going to be, you have to take an opportunity to cut that idea off in some way, right? Or redirect wrong expectation. Let's see. All right. I don't want to take too much longer on this particular piece, but what I'm going to do is zoom just a bit through this. So I wonder if I should make some space. There we go. The speaker's death last night, like the tumble of a stone from the roof of some forsaken cavern, had the entire Embati Service Academy holding its breath, listening for worse. Not the best conditions for an employment interview. Embati Aloran sat in his dormitory bunk and tried to focus on the papers he'd prepared, but intermittent whispering in the main aisle wrecked his concentration. Clumps of students had gathered, murmuring about Kinder's fever. Some were fully dressed in maroon academy uniforms, others wore nightgowns. A few, diverted from the showers, were wrapped only in bath towels. Most of the talk centered on how lucky they were to have been born outside the inbred confines of the nobility. That's point of view number 2. And his world concept is very different from Taggart's world concept. I don't want to go into great detail about what everything is, but if there are things that you notice, we can talk about them. One of the things is he uses a simile right at the front, like the tumble of a stone from the roof of some forsaken cavern. Comparing something to something else is one of your character's major point of view tools and judgment tools. Because whatever they compare to is something that is going to be in their wheelhouse, like in the set of things that they know well, right? And so the idea that somebody would compare an event to the tumble of a stone from the roof of a forsaken cavern, that is a concept that is standardized and that people know in this world, right? It helps to create the overall atmosphere of the underground city, even though I'm not explicitly describing the underground city, if that makes sense. Kinder's fever is going to hook back to the question of whether the nobility is healthy, which they're not. Everybody feels so lucky that they're not nobles, which is kind of important because it's easy when you set up a system of social discrepancies to think that everybody wants to be at the top.
Yeah.
And in this case, it's people really don't.
It goes back to the first point of view where he says he's lucky to be noble and healthy.
Yeah, exactly.
That was the first thing that made that parallel.
Right. There's lucky here and there's lucky there. Everybody's so lucky. Aren't they lucky? Right. What is lucky? I mean, so that's a question, right? What's considered lucky? And you can answer that question without ever having to say, by the way, these people think that X is lucky. You can just have the point of view, go, oh, geez, aren't I lucky to be this such and such and such and such, right? All right, I'm going to do one more, and then we're going to go on to your stuff. All right, now this guy is also going to link back to the question of health. Health is a big deal in this piece. All right. Nicantor stared at the locked door for a long time. Taggart had locked it. He'd locked it because he couldn't face the truth, that Mbati was pursuing them for reasons unknown. But Taggart always locked the door. Taggart wanted to keep secret games. The door must be locked. Nicantor left the wall and sat beside the door again. The lock was brass, bright and new on the bronze door than the last lock, and it would be harder to unlock. Each lock was heavier than the last. Taggart would get a palm lock if he could, trying to keep his secret games, but palm locks couldn't be bought. No one could make them anymore. And so Taggart would lose again, because now he would pick this lock, just like the last one, and the 14 before that. Of course, Taggart would be angry, but Taggart was harmless even when he was angry, and the door must not be locked. Okay?
I think of all of them, this is the most intriguing for me. I like lock picking, so I'm into that world. But I love the final line because I think it's so subtle. But Taggart was harmless even when he was angry. I mean, so you have not just a main character, you have one who is the world around him. He's very small, he's very useless. I mean, it's just such a beautifully subtle line that I think is augmented by the very fact that, you know, there's secrets and there's locks, and I mean, yeah.
But
so this guy, can you tell that he's not very healthy?
Mentally? Or?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was thinking.
He repeats himself a lot, and he returns to certs a lot. So just the fact that he repeats himself and returns to certain kinds of thoughts a lot is an indicator of where he stands in the health versus non-health question. At the same time, he has a lot of suspicion, and he opens the door on the idea that people can do politically machination-y things to each other. They can have secret games or schemes, right? There's also a bunch about technology in this little piece.
Yeah, the palm lock thing.
Yeah. Taggart would get a palm lock if he could, trying to keep his secret games, but palm locks couldn't be bought. No one could make them anymore.
Mm-hmm. And it also tells us that there's a way to obtain them other than buying, so...
Yeah, well, you'd have to get one that's pre-existing, right?
But buying means no one's selling them if you have them already.
Right. And one of the characteristics of the world is that it's a high technology world in decline. Right? Okay. And again, I don't believe in explaining a lot. So you have to put evidence of the characteristics of the world in your points of view and in the things that they observe. Right? So, yeah. And also, I mean, he breaks his brother's lock on his door, like, over and over. So, anyway, yeah. So those are the 3 points of view. And I think each one does something different for the big picture. Because in the end, having different points of view is in large part about giving the reader different ways to look at the same world so they can see it more clearly.
One thing the first and third do in combination is tell us that at least sometimes when they say health, they don't just mean physical. Like, are they afraid, I wonder, to talk about mental health specifically or developmental disabilities? And if that's something they're afraid of, that also tells us something about their culture.
Yeah. Yeah, and obviously these are features that go forward in the book. So, you know.
And just
So anyway, okay. So that said, thank you for bearing with me through that. Let's look at some of the things that you gave me. Okay. Let's see. I like the idea of putting things in the chat bar so you guys can actually look at them. So I'm going to have to pick somebody.
do the third one.
What?
Put them in a pile and do the third one.
I'm going to do Jason first.
Also,
Pick one.
I like giving a little bit of space between the quotes so everybody doesn't get lost.
Yeah.
It's a long one. Across the roiling space between stars, the generation ship Olorun lumbered, and deep in its spinning cavernous hull, a girl dreamed. Under the light of a false sun, against the gentle current of the great river Lokun, Eku the tiger swam like a god, and on the great cat's back, her limbs dipping below the water, lay Sin, the young queen of the abandoned starship. Her clothes, forgotten fabrics, gathered from empty homes, rested strewn on the bank. Her skin, already dark as the tiger's own stripes, soaked up the faux sunlight. Above her floated the white porcelain, oblong-shaped form of her companion, a bot named Blip. "There's demons below the mirror," Sin whispered, her eyes shut and her feet bobbing across the waves as Eku paddled from side to side. "Stop it," Blip spoke in his nasal tone. His white shell displayed a blue pixelated face. A series of blue lights formed 2 circles with dots for eyes, a thin line for mouth, and when needed to emote, a pair of eyebrows. Right now his mouth turned down in a visible frown and he rolled his eyes.
I like it.
This
I think
is
you could
fun, Jason.
Thank you.
What I think is really, one of the things that I think is really interesting going on here is that you have a dream scenario and a real scenario, and they're kind of mixed together, which is kind of cool. You know what's interesting is I'm going to point out across the roiling space between stars, that is a subordinate clause. Okay? Subordinate clauses are a great way to sneak stuff in, right? That's not a very long phrase. Nobody's gonna even think very hard about it because it's a subordinate clause. But you've already got the fact that stars and space are a thing, right?
Roiling space. That intrigues me.
Yeah. And then the Generation Starship obviously locates us, bam, in the middle of the space, right? Anyway, lumbered. Lumbered is not a thing you want a starship to do.
No. It's done wrong if it's lumbering.
Spinning cavernous hull, a girl dreamed, and so yeah. So it's almost like what we've done is this is a camera zoom. This sentence. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yes, it focuses.
Space between stars, starship. Inside the hull, girl, right?
And the hull is spinning, which possibly tells us artificial gravity isn't a thing if we're familiar with
Right, that indicates a lot. So, yes. False sun. There's a lot. You're repeating words like false and faux, which I think is really interesting because because I think the repetition of that emphasizes that that there is a constant awareness that nothing is real, even if all of it is supported by the ship. I think it's kind of interesting. And then there's this sort of legendary feel.
Yeah.
You know, swam like a god. How do you swim like a god?
I think it's all gonna be,
I think it's easy if you're a cat. I don't know.
Yeah, and then the abandoned starship has a queen.
I like that.
You know, that's socially very interesting.
On the other hand, it may not be social so much as she's all that's left was an impression I got as a possibility because of the abandoned, empty homes, etc.
Yeah, the forgotten fabrics gathered from empty homes. Boy, that's for sure, right? And then she has a robot companion that looks like it's a cousin to a toilet. Sorry. Sorry, white porcelain made me think white porcelain oblong. But anyway,
that was the intent. Good.
Yeah.
You could skip the word bot because it would be natural to her just to think of. I'm assuming, I could be totally wrong, but I'm assuming just think of it as blip, not as a bot. So leaving that out might tell us how normal it is for her to have a bot.
And you know, you go to such trouble to describe the way that Blip speaks and the way that he emulates human expression. There's so much emphasis on falseness here. It's really interesting. And I'm thinking that because we're in third person, that this is most likely to be Sin's point of view.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that was the intention was to do the limited omniscient. I think I wrote you originally. I wrote out actually the first quarter of the book all in first person and realized it didn't really work. There's too much information to convey that she should not have.
Yeah.
And if I did roll it across, it felt very unnatural.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I went just back to what she was allowed to have knowledge, there's far too many questions, and it just failed.
But you know what? You can still do a person's point of view, even if you're in a limited omniscient, right? I mean, because what point of view is Harry Potter in? It's in Harry's point of view, even though we bop around and
that was the first book where I realized
like it's mostly in Harry's point of view. So the judgment tools that you use are still going to be there. And if, for example, Kij Johnson wrote a story called 26 Monkeys, Also the Abyss.
I like that title.
Yeah, boy, I tell you. And I highly recommend it. It was an award-winning story. But it was in actually a super distant point of view. But she still managed to get elements of the main character's judgment into the way that she described things. So, yeah. All right, Shay raised her hand. Here we go. I'm going to try to do this. I'm kind of trying to do this in order of people who might have to leave, but because I know Jason might have to leave. But we're good. I think we're good.
Well, if Morgan needs to go, or
I do not. I do not have to go anywhere.
Jason was the one who said he might have to go, so I'm going to do Che. Okay, this long piece. Hazel glared at the chalkboard. The next assignment in Intro to Sewing was written there in obnoxious white chalk. Group assignments are the worst, she thought, and dropped her book bag on the table. She sat down with a loud sigh and pulled the sewing homework from her bag. It didn't look like much. A scrap of beige muslin she'd sewn together with a folded seam. Hazel had put it together before school. She could have done it in her sleep. For her, intro to sewing had practically been remedial. Hazel knew how to hem and pin tuck, knew saddle stitches and back stitches. Granted, she'd been doing a few things wrong, and Miss Fergani had made her learn the right way, which, if it came out looking the same, Hazel wondered why it mattered. The rest of the class filtered in, and Averette bounced over to Hazel, a smug gleam in her violet eyes. Today she wore a scaled-down version of a dress from House Melisandre's fall collection last year. Her mother was a designer at House Melisandre, one of the great houses that combined magic and fashion into the most luxurious and cutting-edge fashions in the world. Averette never shut up about it. Her dress was a simple eggplant A-line with long sleeves, but the pattern of orange fall flowers embroidered on it were enchanted to sway once in a while, and a gold-embroidered leaf slid down the front as if it had just fallen from a tree, gently disappearing behind the flowers at the hem.
You know, my first thought was actually dystopia. The girls are only allowed to study sewing or something like that. And I enjoyed that it went in a direction that I didn't assume at first. So that was pretty cool.
Yeah, so it's really, I think it's interesting because the fact that this is a magic fashion thing actually kind of sneaks up on you. So if you want to, obviously this is an authorial thing, and if you want to, you can kind of subtly ease somebody into a surprise, like, oh, by the way, magic, right? Chalkboard. I'm not sure how many people are using chalkboards out there right now.
Well, they're not.
So chalkboard is sort of like, we're probably not in current modern times. Hazel is a perfectly normal name. Intro to sewing. Beige muslin. Basically, I mean, there's a lot of really good sewing. It's clear that this person knows a ton about sewing, right? And remedial is a great word. I just think the idea that an intro to sewing class could be remedial, I think it's funny. Fergani is not a name I've heard before, so I think that's my first hint that we're not in a world that I'm going to necessarily recognize. And then there's Averette, which is going to strengthen that impression. And then House Melisandre as another piece of that. And then here's a little explanatory piece about who House Melisandre are. Yeah. And then you have the description of the dress, which is interesting because I think, you know, you're going to be using a lot of real-world sewing terms, but none of them are, you know, like, it's not like, well, we're sewing, so we can't possibly be in a fantasy world, right? But it does make me wonder how much this world resembles our world.
This is kind of what I was talking about at the beginning about how what the character focuses on can tell us about the world. Mm-hmm. Obviously about the character, but kind of that at the end, that she's looking not at the elements of, she starts with like, it's a line, etc. She starts with normal things and she moves on to magic without really distinguishing them within the fashion.
Right. And it's clearly she's very interested in sewing, and magic is normal. Right? Yeah. I mean, it's clear that magic is normal here.
Mm-hmm. I think the thing... Oh, go ahead. I was just going to say, for someone who understanding of sewing is very limited, mm-hmm. Actually, for me, the detail of the sewing begins to create distance between me and that, and I begin to find out, okay, I'm beginning to go into a world that is very new, and the layering in with the magic, they're both distant enough away that I still feel like I'm in a foreign world. And mm-hmm. I thought that was a very nice weave of those simultaneously. You know, maybe it'd be different if I understood sewing more and these were familiar words, but they're not.
a
Yes.
summer A line, but not saddle stitch.
Right.
That worked similarly for me. It was, it was this excellent mix for me of the familiar, but then it gradually gets
Right.
different.
Right. And so this is almost like, this one to me almost seems like a zoom out.
Yeah.
But it's
Yeah.
a much more gradual zoom out. It's a gradual zoom out over the course of 3 paragraphs rather than over the course of a single sentence, right?
Yeah.
Because you have Hazel and she's looking at the chalkboard, and then she looks at the table, and then she looks at the right, and then she talks about the context for that. And you just have a sort of an expanding context over the course of the thing, and then the magic comes in and the leaf falls. I would wonder if you could leave a few breadcrumbs a little earlier about the existence of magic, but I could, it depends on how you want to handle it, obviously.
It works for me, but yeah, I can see how that would be an interesting effect too.
Maybe just, a hint of something at the start, very non-explicit, but that would make somebody wonder and go looking for further evidence to explain why they had this funny little feeling at the start.
Even if there's no magic in the intro class, if it's such a basic class that since there's no magic in it, it might as well be remedial. Then you could go to, what's that got to do with anything?
Yeah, in a way, yeah. It doesn't seem like there's any. It doesn't seem like there's any magic in the thing that Hazel brought.
Yes.
And I think Morgan makes a good point. Is Intro to Sewing a class where you're expected to have magic involved, or where you're not?
You're not.
You're what?
You're not.
And
Okay.
The classes.
Well, so in fact, Averette is showing off and kind of breaking the rules, right?
No, because she's wearing. That's what she's wearing.
She didn't make it
You
herself.
can wear whatever you want to school.
Okay.
The homework was to do a folded seam, and the only requirement was to do a folded seam on muslin, with muslin.
Okay.
So just like,
But Averette is showing off because
For family.
the fashions that incorporate magic are ridiculously expensive.
Mm-hmm.
And most people can't afford them.
Okay, so is this something where Hazel would be able to incorporate magic into her assignment if she wanted to? Even though it's not really
Maybe.
required for the class?
Maybe, but it's like you're getting graded on the quality of your folded seam.
Right,
So-
I hear you.
Yeah,
I'm just curious
I based
because,
it on art school a lot because I went to art school, and it's like you have foundations classes
Yeah.
that everyone has to take, no matter how well you draw. It doesn't matter, you have to take foundation classes. And so the Intro to Sewing is a foundation class because, as it comes out later, some people come to this school not really knowing how to sew or only having very minimal skills.
Right,
so
right.
everybody has to take these sewing classes to learn to sew
Mm-hmm.
on the off chance that they don't know how.
Okay,
And the ones who do
that's
kind of
actually
breeze
a
through
really
it.
interesting piece, and I feel like I can, now that you mention it, I can kind of see it in there, but it would be interesting to see if you could find a way to more explicitly stick that in there. And the other thing that I don't see is her dress does not tell me whether that is something she's wearing or whether it's something she's carrying. So even though I know that that our hero has a little piece of muslin that she stitched, and right, I can't tell whether that is contrasting with the dress of Averette, or whether somehow there's a contrast between what. You know, I mean, you could have her say something like, "Oh my God, Averette is always like wearing stuff that."
Well, it does say Averette bounced over to Hazel, blah blah blah. Today she wore a scaled down version.
Yeah. Okay. Yes.
Sorry,
Yes. Okay. Yes. You know, it's right. That's right. And the only thing was there was something about the way that it was done that I was like, I disconnected. I didn't connect her dress with today she wore a dress. Maybe the, which would link it explicitly back to a dress. Yeah. So that's a minor thing, but I think it would be interesting, given that we see Hazel's assignment, it'd be interesting to see Averette's assignment at some point.
Yeah.
And
she whips it out in like the next paragraph.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Like the next couple paragraphs is her is Averette showing up Hazel.
Yeah, totally. There's lots of stuff here. There's lots of stuff to like, and I do like the gradual fade back into the context. That's kind of fun. And all the stitching stuff is really cool. I mean, it's clear that it's important to know this stuff, right?
It's also showing people's homework would be a good way to show that not everyone comes in knowing what they're doing.
Yeah. I wonder about the group assignments thing. Does group assignments apply to the piece of muslin she's sewn together?
No, it's the coming assignment.
Ah.
It's basically their midterm. Is
okay.
A big group assignment, and it's actually the entire plot of the book.
I hear you. The fact that you go to the group assignments and then you go back to here's my current assignment was a little unclear to me. But yeah, I mean, I think magic is normal. Is knowing a lot about sewing normal, or just for these kids?
Just for those kids.
Okay. I mean, because that's clear. It's like she obviously thinks that knowing a ton about sewing is perfectly normal, and that's great because one of the things you want to do at the beginning of a book is register what's normal, so that if things depart from that, you'll notice, right?
Great houses made me think that it was more than that. That the capitalized G made me think of like governing institutions, and I'm like, is this world ruled by fashion designers? That would be interesting. And I don't really white.
No, I put Great House into okay, because in real world fashion there's regular sort of fashion, and then there's haute couture, which is French hand sewn fashions like Dior and Chanel. And I wanted something to indicate that there's one step higher even than an haute couture house here. And so, and it also distinguishes the great houses from just like the local seamstress that you go to, because you need a new outfit. It's like these people aren't. The great houses don't work on it's not your local draper.
Well, I think actually one of the things that you're up against, Che, is that this is an expectation that you're going to need to cut off. Okay, because great house is a phrase, it's not your fault, but it's a phrase that is used a lot for governments in fantasy scenarios.
Yeah.
Just a thought. You might want to see if you can tweak that a little bit. just to cut off that particular possible expectation. Okay.
Yeah,
Awesome.
I was almost thinking of like put it in French as grand maison, but
Yeah.
because I don't know, I've been thinking of upping the French quota in this.
I don't know about that
I don't think that would hurt anything.
in this case, definitely.
I don't think that would hurt anything. I think it would be informative. Okay, so I'm gonna put in Morgan's piece. Are we good? Can we did that feel helpful, Che?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Okay. So here's Morgan's piece. And Jason, I know that you may have to go, and if you have to go, that's okay. Nico
I actually will. Thank you very, very
Androsi.
much. So,
Nico Androsi smiled as he looked at the freshly healed tattoo on his arm. Dang. On his left arm. It was simple, the open loop of a new Imperial agent. It said to everyone that he was inexperienced and possibly gullible. Ha! Nico knew he wasn't. He'd studied not hard, but effectively. His exam scores were high, and he'd earned the respect and recommendations of his instructors. More importantly, though, he knew what he'd been taught, and he wouldn't forget. Ready for your first assignment? The division's senior agent sounded almost sincere in her question. Nico was sure she'd asked 1,000 times of 1,000 new agents. Nonetheless, he nodded. I am. Good. You're partnered with the agent Aideen Serukano. I could be mispronouncing these, and I apologize for that.
No, you are not, actually. I'm
The
pleased.
senior agent handed Nico a sheaf of papers. She's waiting for you in the lobby. Get going. She's not a patient woman. Nico nodded. The other agent waved a hand towards the door. Nico turned sharply, back straight, shoulders square, and left. Behind him, the senior agent shook her head. That won't last, she muttered. Totally different. See, what I love about looking at different pieces from different people is that the worlds are so freaking different. Okay? So we are out of the real world with the first 3 words, which are a person's name, right? Freshly healed tattoo on his left arm. Tattoos are always an interesting thing. I think one of the reasons why they're so interesting is because they're meaningful to people.
Yeah,
And because they're meaningful to people in this world, we expect them to be meaningful in other worlds as well. Right?
permanent.
What?
The permanence, I think, has a lot to do with that. Never mind.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think you're right. It was simple, the open loop of a new Imperial agent.
That very firmly positions us in a different, in further difference. We know we're not
Right.
in.
So we actually now have a picture of the kind of society that it's basically like this. Each phrase gives us another peek into what the larger structure is, right? So we have Imperial agents, which means we have an empire with agents. The next sentence made me laugh because it said to everyone that he was inexperienced and possibly gullible. That was the last thing I expected. And that was why I laughed. So I don't know if you meant that to be humorous, Morgan, but new Imperial agent. New is not enough for me to say, oh, this person's inexperienced and possibly gullible. But when you point it out, I see that new was there, right? I remember, oh, right, he's new. Gullible is interesting. I mean, I think it's interesting that because Imperial agent is such a loaded phrase, we're going to be, people know that Imperial agents are a thing, right? And so they have a raft of possible expectations. In the same way that with Che's thing, great house is a phrase that people have heard before, and so it comes with a raft of different expectations and possible scenarios. Imperial agent is another one of these things that people have heard of Imperial agents before, and stormtroopers are probably going to be one of the possible things they have in their minds, right? So
oh my God, yeah.
When you have a phrase like that, you have to make sure that you're controlling the possibilities, which is something that I think inexperienced and possibly gullible is doing.
Definitely.
I mean, I think it's interesting you didn't say corruptible,
Good point.
right?
Hmm.
That we have now an expectation that people in this society think a new imperial agent is someone who can be fooled, not somebody who can necessarily be influenced.
Hmm. Right.
Right?
Tells us about their tactics for dealing with the government.
Yeah. So actually, it's good to note that that there are some phrases that are like explosions of world building. King is one of them, right?
What?
Imperial agent is another one. Great house is another one. These are phrases that people have heard enough times before that they're suddenly going to go, I get it. And they're going to feel like they've just been given a lot of information about the world. And so that's why you have to kind of tune the way that those are presented, because if there is an implication that you don't want it to have, then you need to make sure that one gets separated off, right? Or if there's an implication that you think they're not going to immediately have that needs to be added, then you need to add it. Anyway, okay, so you'd studied not hard but effectively, exam scores high, blah, 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 recommendations of instructors. More importantly, more importantly than the details of, so more importantly is another judgment piece, okay? More importantly, though, he knew what he'd been taught and he wouldn't forget. I wonder who impressed upon him that was so important. Because it doesn't seem like it would be as important as how well he'd performed in his studies, but you know, I mean, he comes across as a noob, right? Doesn't he?
Yeah.
Because the contrast between things that readers are going to see as important and things that he sees as important is going to be an interesting little contrast there. And that's one of the things you can manipulate, right? Like, Che, what you were doing by showing us so clearly how important all the details of the sewing are, right? So, yeah. Okay, you wouldn't forget. I'm wondering, see, this makes me curious. Like, what would he forget? But, I mean, obviously that's something that's probably going to be coming up. But then we're going to go into action. Ready for your first assignment. The deficiency you read sound almost sincere.
We've been through this before.
It's good judgment stuff. I mean, that's you know that Nico knows that she isn't sincere, right? Because almost sincere means not sincere, right? I mean, almost is one of those great words. It's not sincere if it's almost sincere. And you explain why. 1,000 times, 1,000 new agents. I am. She paired with blah, blah, blah. Sheaf of papers waiting in the lobby. She's not a patient woman. Okay. I've already got a picture of Agent Aideen Sarah Ukano because she's not a patient woman and she's an agent. It's funny what kinds of expectations come out of these various things. Nico nodded, waved the hand towards the door. Nico turned sharply. I mean, I'm assuming that the turn sharply suggests that these agents are quasi-military.
I had a thing about a salute in there, and I looked at it last night and thought, I'm not really sure about that.
Yeah, I don't see why he would salute.
Yeah, I couldn't figure that out. So
well, it depends, because that little piece is the piece that tells us that we're quasi-military. Because
sharp turn.
Up to this point, we could be a spy organization that's more casual in the expectations of behavior. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
Right.
But if he's expected to stand at attention and that kind of stuff,
Different kind of being.
and behind him, well, so this is interesting. We're not fully in his point of view here. Because he is out the door by that point.
Yeah.
So this is not, this is not fully limited to his point of view, which is fine.
Yeah.
Right? It's about choice. It's not about, well, you did that wrong, right? So if you choose to show things that this person can't see, it's similar to Jason's thing, right? Remember, he said that he tried to do it as first person and then it didn't work, and so he had to do it as third person because there were things he wanted to include that this character could not know. So that's a choice that we can remark on right there at the end. But up to this point, everything seems to indicate that he knows the point of view too. So.
Yeah. It's a sort of limited omniscient.
Yeah.
Point of view.
Studied not hard, but effectively. He's funny. Funny. I mean, like, he's like, I know what I'm doing. I didn't totally study, but I'm good, and I'm not gonna forget anything. You immediately expect him to be like forgetting things. And totally not understanding. Like, do you know what I'm saying? Like, I think it's anyway. I think that's funny. Like, I'm a new agent. Everybody's gonna see me as gullible, but believe me, I am not. It's the sort of methinks he doth protest too much thing, right?
And I'm not sure how he gets from there to where he is in the story that I invented him in. That I invented him for, which is many years later. It's interesting, actually, kind of to see what comes out of the way that this is written, because it's like, well, did you expect that? No, I did not, but I'm not displeased with it because. But can you see? I mean, you can see the evidence for it, right? Yeah, no, I can see that. It makes sense. And it's actually a very strong impression. There's a lot of different pieces. So one of the things that I want to make sure that I impress on people is that there are 1,000 opportunities in a piece of text that's this small, right? Just every time you have a name, every time you have an opportunity for judgment, every time you have an opportunity to indicate the character's knowledge, this can reveal both the character and the world, right? Because a person has a place in a world, right? Right. And in Che's piece, I get a really clear picture of Averette's place in the world. I wonder if there's a way to get a little bit more in about Hazel's place in the world. Because Hazel is the person that I see least clearly. They're she has her sewing knowledge, which is terrific and very specific, which is fantastic. But I don't get much of a picture of where she perceives herself on the social hierarchy. I mean, clearly it's not up where Averette is. Yeah. But so like I would be looking for just a tiny. It doesn't need to be much. Just a word or two. Mm-hmm. Something specific about Hazel that will locate her in a social context that links to the outside world. If that makes sense. Yeah. All right, so we are way over time.
Do you guys have another 5 minutes? Because Alvaro gave me a really tiny piece.
Absolutely.
Alvaro, our author from yesterday. And I don't want to omit it, even though he's not here, because I did say I would.
No.
So.
No, I totally want to hear his.
Those who survive combat with the Sarakul return home with holes in their memories. As memory setters, it's our job to delve inside their skulls and repair the damage. When I say our job, I'm stretching the truth, since I'm not yet a memory setter. During my last 3 years of apprenticeship under Master Agoza, I've assisted with many restorations. Even completed a few solo, but technically I'm still an apprentice. Tomorrow that will change. Okay, here's another great piece about grammar and how it helps you world build. Okay. Look at combat with the Sarakul. That is hidden. That is a hidden place in the sentence grammatically. It's not in the main clause, right? It's actually the subject of the sentence is those, and survive combat with Sarakul is a subordinate clause underneath the word who. Those return home, right? And so survive combat with the Sarakul is a huge, gigantic, honking piece of world building, right?
Yeah.
A, combat's going on. B, people are having to survive it. C, there are some folks out there called the Sarakul, right? Those who survive combat with Sarakul return home with holes in their memories. That has all kinds of implications too. Why would they have holes in their memories? What is it about the Sarakul and what the heck are they doing, right? We're certainly not on Earth. Right? Or maybe we're on Earth, but we're in a very, very divergent place from where we are currently right now. Right?
I would assume instantly science fiction, that you're in outer space fighting these things, but it could also be a secondary fantasy world.
That was my impression. The phrase Master Agoza and the
Master Agoza, yeah, that one is a hey, this could be fantasy piece. The other thing that says hey, this could be fantasy to me is not the presence of something, but the absence of something.
Doctor?
The absence of a lot of extra words or technical terms that are not English. Right? Master Agoza is definitely a piece of evidence. And also the fact that you have apprentice. Apprentice is a world-located phrase that seems to be something that is classical as opposed to modern or futuristic. Obviously, it's a word that's flexible. You can have apprenticeships in the future, you know. But the fact that memory setter sounds almost like typesetter.
No, I was going to say a bone setter.
Or bone setter, right? But it's like,
what
people who are setters are. I'm thinking like setting like the dog. But my point is, yeah, that phrase is not done in the sort of format that futuristic stuff typically is done in.
My first thought at memory setter was they're making things up, and then you get to repair the damage, and then once we start talking about it, and you mentioned doctors, then I got to bone setter, and that sort of.
You know, it's funny. I think the reason why I don't immediately go to bone setter is because there's a mismatch between the metaphors. Because bone setter creates an expectation that there's something exists and has been broken and needs to be put back together. But that doesn't fit with holes in their memories.
Right.
See, I did instantly go to bone setter.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, they're putting the memories back together
Yeah.
in some way, either through technology or magic.
And you know what? That's perfectly possible. It's not like this is a make or break issue in the story.
Yeah.
But there is that little piece of inconsistency there in the metaphors, and all it does is it leaves you in a place where you're not certain.
Mm-hmm.
Right? There's nothing inherently wrong with it, and as you get into the next paragraph and the next paragraph, very likely those questions will be answered and the uncertainty will go away.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like the damage. I mean, holes in your memory is definitely damage, but the repair, is that necessarily recovery somehow of the missing memories, or just filling the holes because having a hole in your memory is in and of itself problematic?
Yeah. Repair,
And if you put
though, because
something
it's got
in there,
things on both
anything,
sides.
it's better.
Memory setter and repair are on the fix what's broken side, and holes in their memories and restorations is more on the replace something that's missing side.
Yeah.
And you know what? We can consider that a mystery.
No problem.
You know what? Having questions in a first paragraph is not even just okay, it's optimal.
Yeah, because it's what moves you forward.
You don't want to be like, these things don't work together at all. But if you're not sure, then it's nice because you will have to read forward in order to answer your questions. So, okay, so that was everything, you guys.
Ooh,
How do we feel at this point?
informed.
Was that worth doing? Was that worth doing as a
Yes.
workshop
Totally.
thing? And
Yeah, I think so.
I don't know how people who watch this video will feel, honestly, because dealing with it only in audio is going to be a trick, I think. But
You can put it in the description.
on
Passages.
the other hand, I think it works for the piece, so it would be interesting to try it again. And next time, I will deliberately schedule an hour and a half. But anyway, thank you to you all for being here, and this was really fun, and I really want to write now. Anyway, thank you to everybody who watches this, and don't forget, support my Patreon, and you can do more of this. If you are a part of my Patreon, you can do more of this more regularly if you think it's valuable. Pay me money and we'll talk.
Yes.
But yeah,
Do.
next week I think we're going to talk about hats.
Yes.
Because that'll be fun and a bit different. And yeah, and I'm gonna I will talk to you guys off camera about doing a experimental setup for the new technological Google tool. Okay?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
All right. Thanks for being here, everybody. It was great to have you.
Likewise.
I am stopping the broadcast.